The letter from the IRS came on a Tuesday. Audit. I didn't panic. Random selection, I figured. Happens to a few people every year. I'd been using the same accountant for 7 years. Professional, expensive, thorough. When the audit started, everything changed. Numbers came up. Deductions. Expenses. I didn't recognize any of them. The agent looked at me. My accountant said, "You signed these." That's when I realized I'd been signing tax returns for 7 years without reading them. And now I had a very big problem. My name is Everett Chase. I'm 41 years old, owner of a small Italian restaurant in Eugene, Oregon called Tavo. I've been running it for 9 years. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a chef, a host, someone who knows how to make people feel welcome and serve good food. That's why I hired an accountant. This is the story of how my trusted accounting firm committed tax fraud in my name for 7 years, how the IRS came after me for $125,000, and how I fought to prove I was a victim, not a criminal. I opened Tavola in 2015. It started small. 45 seats, simple menu, mostly classics. Pasta, risotto, braised meats, the kind of food my grandmother used to make. The first year was chaos. I was chef, manager, host, sometimes dishwasher. My wife Larkin helped with front of house when she wasn't working her nursing shifts. We barely broke even. But by year 2, word of mouth started spreading. Local food bloggers wrote about us. Weekend reservations filled up. We expanded to 65 seats, hired more staff, started making real money. That's when I realized I needed help with finances. I'm good with food costs and labor percentages, but taxes, accounting, that's a different language. A fellow restaurant owner recommended Pinnacle Accounting Group. They handle all my books, he said. Tax prep, payroll, everything. Worth every penny. I called them in early 2017, met with one of their accountants, a guy named Roland Voss, mid-40s, glasses, always wore a blazer. Spoke confidently about deductions, depreciation, business expenses. As a restaurant owner, there are dozens of legitimate deductions you're probably missing, he told me during our first meeting. Equipment, supplies, use of your vehicle. Professional development. I'll make sure you're taking advantage of everything you're entitled to. That sounded good. I was paying too much in taxes, I figured. If there were legal ways to reduce that, why not? Pinnacle's fee was $4,500 a year. High, but Roland assured me their expertise would save me more than that. I signed a contract, gave them access to my business bank accounts, receipts, expense records. They'd handle everything. Quarterly estimated taxes, year-end returns, even bookkeeping if I wanted. Just send us your documents each quarter, Roland said. We'll take care of the rest. You focus on running your restaurant. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The first year with Pinnacle went smoothly. They filed my 2017 tax return in March 2018. I got a refund, $3,200. I was thrilled. Roland called to walk me through the return. We identified several deductions you hadn't been claiming. Home, since you do administrative work from home. Vehicle depreciation for your car, since you use it for business errands. Professional meals, networking with suppliers and other restaurant owners. It all sounded reasonable. I did work from home sometimes, ordering supplies, reviewing schedules, answering emails. I did drive my car to meet vendors. I did have business lunches. Just sign here, Roland said, pointing to the signature line on the tax return. I signed, didn't read the whole thing. It was 40 pages of dense tax language. Roland was the expert. That's what I paid him for. The pattern continued for years. 2018 taxes, filed in early 2019. Another refund, this time $4,100. Roland mentioned something about increased equipment depreciation and business travel deductions. I'd driven to Portland a few times for food expos. Made sense. 2019 taxes, filed in 2020 during the pandemic. The record that year, we'd switched to takeout only for months, but somehow I still got a refund, $3,800. Roland said he'd maximized COVID-related business relief provisions. I didn't question it. Why would I? Pinnacle was doing exactly what I'd hired them to do, minimizing my tax burden legally. Every April, the same routine. Roland would email me the completed tax return. I'd skim the first page, see my refund or payment due, then flip to the signature page and sign. I trusted him. I trusted Pinnacle. They were professionals, expensive professionals. My restaurant was thriving. We'd survived the pandemic, expanded our wine list, started hosting private events. I was working 70-hour weeks. The last thing I wanted to do was spend hours deciphering tax forms, so I didn't. The letter arrived in February 2024. Plain envelope, IRS return address. I opened it in my office at the restaurant, between lunch and dinner service. Dear Mr. Chase, you have been selected for an audit of your 2021 tax return. This is a routine examination to verify the accuracy of your reported income and deductions. My stomach dropped. Audit. I'd never been audited before. I called Larkin immediately. The IRS is auditing me. What? Why? It says routine examination. Random selection, probably. Should we be worried? I don't think so. Roland handles everything. He'll know what to do. I called Pinnacle. Roland answered on the second ring. Everett, hey, what's up? I got a letter. IRS audit. 2021 return. A pause. Okay, that happens sometimes. Random selection. Don't worry about it. Forward me the letter. I'll coordinate with the IRS and represent you through the process. Is this normal? Completely. Happens to maybe 1% of taxpayers. They just want to verify some numbers. We've got all the documentation. We'll be fine. His confidence reassured me. This was exactly why I paid Pinnacle, so I didn't have to handle situations like this alone. I forwarded the letter and went back to work. Over the next month, Roland communicated with the IRS. He told me they'd requested documentation for certain deductions. He was gathering everything. It's moving along, he said during one call. Just standard procedure. In April, the IRS requested an in-person meeting. Me, Roland, and an IRS examining agent, scheduled for May 15th at the IRS office in Eugene. Do I need a lawyer? I asked Roland. No. This is just an informational meeting. I'll be there. We'll answer their questions, show them our documentation, and that'll be the end of it. May 15th came. I put on a button-down shirt and khakis. Not sure what you wear to an IRS audit. Met Roland in the parking lot. He carried a leather briefcase stuffed with folders. Ready? He asked. I guess. We walked into the federal building together. The IRS examining agent was a woman named Margaret Feldman, late 50s, reading glasses on a chain. No-nonsense demeanor. Her office was small, desk, 2 chairs for us, filing cabinets lining the walls. Mr. Chase, thank you for coming, she said, shaking my hand. Mr. Voss. She nodded at Roland. We sat. Mark, I've reviewed your 2021 tax return. I have some questions about certain deductions you claimed. Of course, Roland said smoothly. We're happy to provide any documentation you need. Margaret turned a page. Let's start with the home office deduction. You claimed $18,000. $18,000? That seemed high, but I didn't say anything. Roland was handling this. Mr. Chase uses a portion of his home for business administration, Roland explained. Ordering, scheduling, accounting work. We calculated square footage and allocated a percentage of his mortgage, utilities, and home expenses. Margaret looked at me. Mr. Chase, can you describe your home office? I have a desk in our spare bedroom. I use it for paperwork sometimes. How often? Maybe a few hours a week, when I'm not at the restaurant. Margaret made a note. And the square footage of this space? I don't know exactly. Maybe 10 by 10? It's a small room. She nodded, turned another page. You also claimed $22,000 in business travel expenses for 2021. $22,000? I'd driven to Portland maybe 3 times that year for vendor meetings. Where did you travel for business in 2021? Margaret asked. I glanced at Roland. He jumped in. Mr. Chase attended several industry conferences and trade shows. We have receipts for mileage, hotels, meals. Which conferences? I hesitated. I couldn't remember attending any conferences in 2021. We were still recovering from COVID restrictions. I'd need to check my records, I said. Margaret's expression didn't change. Mr. Voss, can you provide those receipts? Absolutely. I have everything in my files. She moved on. You claimed $15,000 in professional development and education expenses. Can you explain what that covers? I had no idea. I hadn't taken any courses, hadn't attended workshops. Roland cut in again. Culinary classes, wine certification programs, industry publications, all legitimate professional development for a restaurant owner. Margaret looked at me. Mr. Chase, did you take culinary classes in 2021? No, I've been cooking for 20 years. I didn't need classes. Wine certification? No. She made another note. The meeting continued like this for 90 minutes. Margaret would bring up a deduction, vehicle expenses, equipment depreciation, business meals, and I'd realize I didn't recognize the numbers. Roland would explain each one, sounding confident and knowledgeable. But I could see Margaret wasn't buying it. Finally, she closed her folder. Mr. Chase, I'm going to be direct with you. Many of these deductions appear to be overstated or fabricated. I'm expanding this audit to include your 2020, 2019, and 2018 returns as well. My heart started pounding. What does that mean? It means I'll be reviewing multiple years to determine if there's a pattern of improper deduction. I didn't fabricate anything. Roland handles all my taxes. She looked at Roland and then back at me. You signed these returns, Mr. Chase. That makes you responsible. We left the IRS office in silence. In the parking lot, I turned to Roland. What the hell is going on? It's fine. She's being overly aggressive. These are all legitimate deductions. Sometimes IRS agents don't understand small business expenses. I don't understand them either. I didn't take culinary classes. I didn't travel $22,000 worth. Roland's jaw tightened. I prepared those returns based on the information you provided. I didn't provide information about culinary classes because I didn't take any. Look, tax preparation involves some interpretation. Maximizing deductions is part of my job. If the IRS wants to disallow some of them, fine. We'll negotiate, but you're not going to owe much. Worst case, a small penalty. I wanted to believe him, but something felt very wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the audit meeting, the deductions I didn't recognize, Roland's too smooth explanations. At 2 a.m., I went to my home office and pulled out my copies of the last few years' tax returns. I'd never actually read them, just signed and filed. I started with 2021, page after page of deductions. Home office, $18,000. Travel, $22,000. Professional development, $15,000. Vehicle expenses, $12,000. Business meals, $9,500. I added it up, $76,000 in deductions for a restaurant that had grossed $300,000 in revenue that year. I opened the 2020 return, similar pattern, huge deductions, things I didn't remember doing. 2019, same thing. 2018, same. I felt sick. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not Roland, someone independent. His name was Adrian Cross, a tax attorney a friend had recommended. I explained the situation. The audit, the deductions I didn't recognize, Roland's explanations. Bring me all your tax returns from the last 7 years, Adrian said, and any supporting documentation you have, receipts, mileage logs, anything. I gathered everything I could find and drove to his office that afternoon. Adrian spread the returns across his conference table, spent 2 hours going through them while I waited. Finally, he looked up. Everett, this is bad. How bad? These returns are full of aggressive and likely fraudulent deductions. Home office expenses far beyond what's reasonable. Travel and education expenses with no documentation. Meals and entertainment at levels that don't match your business type. Roland said these were legitimate. They're not. And here's the thing. You signed these returns. That makes you legally responsible, even if your accountant prepared them. My chest tightened. What's the worst case? Adrian pulled out a calculator. If the IRS disallows even half of these deductions across 4 years, you're looking at roughly $85,000 in additional taxes owed. Add penalties and interest, could be $125,000, maybe more. I thought I might throw up. Can I fight this? You can, but it's going to be difficult. The burden of proof is on you to show that these deductions were legitimate. And from what you're telling me, you don't have documentation because the expenses never actually occurred. So what do? First, fire Pinnacle. Second, hire me to represent you in this audit. Third, we cooperate fully with the IRS and try to negotiate the best settlement we can. I left his office in a daze. I called Roland that evening. I talked to a tax attorney. He says the deductions on my returns are fraudulent. Silence on the other end. Roland, look, Everett, I did my best to minimize your tax burden. That's what you hired me for. You claimed I took culinary classes I never took. You claimed travel expenses for trips I never made. Those were estimates based on industry standards. Estimates? Roland, I signed those returns thinking they were accurate. You told me they were accurate. And they were, based on the information available. I never gave you information about $22,000 in travel. His voice hardened. You provided receipts and records. I prepared returns accordingly. If you want to second-guess my work now because the IRS is auditing you, that's your choice. But I stand by everything I filed. I'm terminating our contract. Fine. You'll receive a final invoice for time spent on your audit representation. He hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. Roland wasn't even denying it. He was just deflecting blame. Adrian became my new representative. Over the next 3 months, he worked with the IRS to review my returns from 2017 through 2021. The findings were devastating. Across 5 years, Roland had claimed nearly $400,000 in deductions. The IRS determined that at least $250,000 of that was unsupported or outright false. Here's what Roland had done. Claimed I had a home office that took up 30% of my house. Reality, I used a spare bedroom, maybe 2 hours a week. Claimed I'd traveled extensively for business. Conferences, vendor meetings, research trips. Reality, I'd driven to Portland a handful of times. No receipts, no hotel stays, no conference registrations. Claimed I'd spent $15,000 a year on professional development, culinary courses, wine education, industry certifications. Reality, I'd taken none of those courses. Claimed I drove my personal vehicle 40,000 miles a year for business. Reality, maybe 5,000 tops. Claimed I'd spent nearly $10,000 a year on business meals for networking and client entertainment. Reality, most of my business meals were eating family meal with my staff at the restaurant. Roland had systematically inflated every possible deduction, year after year, and I'd signed every return without questioning it. The IRS calculated what I actually owed: $85,000 in back taxes, plus $32,000 in penalties, plus $8,000 in interest. Total, $125,000. I didn't have $125,000. While dealing with my own audit, I started asking around. Had anyone else used Pinnacle Accounting? Turned out, several local business owners had. I reached out to them. A woman who owned a hair salon told me she'd been audited the year before. They disallowed $40,000 in deductions Roland had claimed. Cost me $18,000 to settle with the IRS. A guy who ran a landscaping company. I fired Pinnacle after my accountant friend looked at my returns and said they were way too aggressive. I'm just waiting for the IRS to come after me. A bakery owner. Roland claimed I'd traveled to Europe for culinary research. I've never left the country. There was a pattern. Roland wasn't just careless or aggressive with deductions. He was committing systematic fraud. I asked Adrian if I could report Roland to authorities. You can report him to the IRS for preparer fraud, Adrian said, and potentially to the Oregon Board of Accountancy if he's a licensed CPA. Is he? Adrian looked it up. No, he's not a CPA. He's just an enrolled agent, someone authorized to represent taxpayers before the IRS. But there are still professional standards he's supposed to follow. I filed a complaint with the IRS Office of Professional Responsibility. Provided all my documentation. The other victims I'd talked to filed complaints too. An investigator contacted me a month later. We're opening a formal investigation into Roland Voss and Pinnacle Accounting Group. Your complaint isn't the first we've received. Can you provide testimony if needed? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Adrian was negotiating with the IRS on my behalf. Here's our argument, he explained. You're a victim of preparer fraud. You relied in good faith on a professional you paid to prepare accurate returns. You didn't personally benefit from these false deductions. The refunds you received were small compared to the inflated deductions claimed. You're cooperating fully now that you know the truth. The IRS wasn't entirely sympathetic. You signed the returns. The examining agent, Margaret, reminded us during a conference call. You're responsible for reviewing them before signing. Mr. Chase is a restaurant owner, not a tax expert, Adrian countered. He hired Pinnacle specifically because he doesn't understand tax law. He trusted them to prepare accurate returns. That trust was violated. After several months of back and forth, the IRS offered a settlement. They'd reduce the penalties from $32,000 to $12,000, acknowledging that I was a victim of preparer fraud. But I still owed the full $85,000 in back taxes, plus $8,000 in interest. Total, $105,000, $20,000 less than the original assessment. Still a devastating amount. Adrian advised me to take it. If you fight this and lose, you'll owe the full $125,000 plus legal fees. This is the best deal you're going to get. I agreed to the settlement. I didn't have $100,500 in cash. Most small business owners don't. The IRS agreed to a payment plan. 36 months, $3,000 a month. To afford that, I had to make changes. I took out a business line of credit, basically a loan against my restaurant's revenue. Used that to make the first year of payments while restructuring my finances. I cut costs at Tavola, reduced staff hours, scaled back our wine list, stopped doing private events. Larkin and I cut personal expenses too. No vacations, no eating out. We drove our cars into the ground. It was brutal. For $3, every spare dollar went to the IRS. Meanwhile, the investigation into Roland and Pinnacle was ongoing. The IRS had identified at least 15 other victims, small business owners he'd defrauded with the same tactics. In 2025, Roland was charged with multiple counts of tax preparer fraud. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison plus restitution to his victims. The restitution order required him to pay back a percentage of what we'd all lost. In my case, about $18,000. But Roland had no assets. He'd spent everything. The restitution was symbolic. I never saw a dime. By 2027, I'd finished paying off the IRS. 3 years of monthly payments, $105,000 gone, plus Adrian's legal fees, another $22,000. Total cost of trusting Roland, $127,000. Vola survived, but barely. We're smaller now, less ambitious, more of the work myself to save on labor costs. But we're still open. That's something. Looking back, I can identify exactly where I went wrong. First, I never read my tax returns before signing them. I trusted Roland completely. That was my biggest mistake. No matter how much you trust a professional, you're signing a legal document. You're responsible for it. Read it. Second, I didn't ask questions when things seemed off. $18,000 home office deduction. That should have raised a red flag. But I wanted to believe I was entitled to it. I wanted to save money on taxes. Third, I didn't get a second opinion. If I'd had another accountant review Roland's work even once, they would have spotted the fraud immediately. Fourth, I didn't keep my own records. Roland had my receipts, my bank statements, my documentation. I should have kept copies and compared them to what he claimed. The IRS tells you on every tax form, you are responsible for the accuracy of your return. I thought that was just legal boilerplate. It's not. It's literally true. If your accountant commits fraud in your name, you're the one who pays. After everything was settled, I started warning other small business owners. I spoke at a local Chamber of Commerce meeting, told my story, explained what Roland had done and how I'd missed it. If your tax refund seems too good to be true, ask questions, I said. If your accountant claims deductions you don't remember, push back, and for God's sake, read your tax returns before you sign them. The feedback was eye-opening. Multiple people came up to me afterwards saying they'd had similar experiences, not necessarily fraud, but accountants who were overly aggressive with deductions, pushing boundaries, taking risks with their clients' money. One guy told me, my accountant claims I travel 50,000 miles a year for business. I don't. I've been meaning to say something, but I figured he knows what he's doing. Say something, I told him, before the IRS does. I also worked with a local business advocacy group to create educational materials about tax preparer fraud, warning signs, red flags, how to verify your accountant's credentials, what questions to ask. It won't undo what happened to me. but maybe it'll prevent someone else from going through the same thing. It's been 3 years since that IRS letter arrived. 3 years since my life was turned upside down by someone I trusted. Roland is out of prison now. Served 18 months. Got released early for good behavior. I heard he moved to another state. Started over with a new name, probably. The other victims and I tried to sue Pinnacle Accounting Group for damages, but the company had dissolved. No assets to go after. So we lost everything and got nothing back. Vola is still standing. Smaller, quieter, less ambitious than it used to be, but still serving good food, still making people happy. Larkin and I are okay. The financial stress strained our marriage for a while, but we made it through. We're more careful now, more skeptical, less trusting of professionals who promise easy solutions. I do my own bookkeeping now. Hired a new accountant, a local CPA with 20 years of experience and 0 complaints on file. She's conservative with deductions, maybe too conservative. But after what I went through, I prefer that. She also insists I review every tax return line by line before signing. No shortcuts, no blind trust. You need to understand what you're signing, she told me during our first meeting. That's not negotiable. She's right. If I could go back to 2017 and talk to myself before I hired Pinnacle, here's what I'd say. Don't assume expensive means trustworthy. Don't assume professional means honest. Don't sign documents you haven't read, no matter how complicated they are. Ask questions, lots of them. If your accountant can't explain a deduction in plain English, don't claim it. Keep your own records. Compare them to what your accountant files. If the numbers don't match, find out why. And most importantly, remember that you are responsible. Not your accountant, not your bookkeeper. You. When you sign that tax return, you're swearing under of perjury that everything on it is true. If it's not, you'll pay the price. I paid $127,000 to learn that lesson. Don't make the same mistake I did. Roland committed the fraud, but I enabled it by not paying attention, not asking questions, not taking responsibility for my own financial document. That's on. Vola is still here. I'm still here. We survived. But we're different now. More careful, more aware, less naive about the world and the people in it. Roland thought he could steal from his clients and get away with it. He was wrong. He's a convicted felon now. But I thought I could blindly trust a professional and everything would be fine. I was wrong too, and I paid for it.